Karen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, this, of course, is a conversation that could really go on for hours because there are so many things that can have an impact on this. I would suppose I would start by asking you, is in the process of a breakup in a relationship where children are involved, what is the top 3 things you need to do first, even before that split happens?
Well, one has to consider the best interests of the minor children always. They are always of paramount importance. So the first issue is, where are the children going to reside primarily? Are they going to reside primarily with the mother or with the father? When that decision is taken, then the children reside primarily with one parent and the other parent contributes maintenance towards the children. That's essentially what one has to consider initially.
Finding the correct legal representation, would that be imperative for everybody, or is there hope that parents of a child can come to an understanding without involving legal representative?
Parties can proceed to attend to their divorces without the need for legal representation. Our magistrates' courts now have a regional court where divorces are attended to as well. So the necessity for going to the High Court is no longer there. But it's always better to have legal representation. Obviously, approaching an attorney, they're going to discuss with you what your rights and responsibilities are, what your rights are in terms of your divorce proceedings, more specifically in terms of your marital regime, what are you entitled to in terms of your patrimonial assets, etc.
Now, speaking of what you're entitled to, the issue of maintenance is a very emotional talking point. But of course, it's also very practical because children need to be taken care of and money is needed for that. And it's something that various people feel they have the right to weigh in on. We even have TV shows based on parents or spouses or ex-spouses wanting to get the maintenance to be able to look after their child. How does a court go about, or the legal system go about, deciding what kind of maintenance is indeed fit?
Right. Well, when you look at maintenance with relation to children, it's completely separate to spousal maintenance. There's 2 forms of maintenance, one which the wife or husband would be entitled to, and one for the children specifically. When the court considers what maintenance is required for the children, there are 5 major factors which they consider. First of all, the child needs a house in order to reside in. Secondly, school fees need to be catered for. Medical fees need to be catered for, and then their day-to-day living, groceries and expenses, as well as certain luxury items if they're minor children. That does come into play as well. So those are the major considerations that a court will look at in terms of determining the amount of maintenance. A court will also look at the lifestyle of the children, and one always submits when a divorce happens that the lifestyle whilst the parties were married versus lifestyle after the parties are divorced must be of the same standard. But one has to think practically about that. You have one household that's now splitting into 2 homes. The expenses obviously must increase. So you try to keep the maintenance of the minor children to afford them to stay in a position as close to the relation or the position that they were in prior to the divorce proceedings.
Now, is it fair to say that that is where things can get quite messy? If one parent is saying, this is how much I demand, I know that he or she can afford it, but he or she is not coming to the party.
Yes. So what happens is when the court looks at how much maintenance is to be payable, one has to consider, first of all, that the starting point for the contribution of maintenance is the Children's Act. The Section 18 of the Children's Act relates to parental responsibilities and rights. And Section 18(2)(d) specifically states that a parent has a responsibility to contribute to the maintenance of those minor children. So when you consider how much and what's involved, you have to look at the income and expenses of both parents. They both have a duty to support that child. So the court will look at what the income and expenses of those 2 parents are, and they will provide for maintenance in accordance with their expenses. So they prorate their salary.
Now, the platform of social media, we were just saying before we started the interview, has sure made your jobs a little bit more complicated, as it were. If parents or a caregiver of a child has not had joy going the legal route, and then they decide to go the social media route to try and shame the other person, What are the legal intricacies there? Is that a dangerous space to wade into, as we've seen in this case between the actress Ntando Duma and Junior DeRocca, a DJ?
Well, again, you need to consider what is in the best interest of a minor child. Is it in the best interest of those children or a child for their dirty laundry in terms of what's happening between their parents to be splashed all over the media and for them to be shamed in that way? I mean, it can never be. Parents also need to realize that they are forever tied by these children. They need to learn to co-parent going forward. And, you know, maintenance is just something that needs to be attended to. It always shocks me that when parents are together, they'll live on cheese and toast forever. But when they separate, it suddenly maintenance is a huge issue, and one wonders, where does the maintenance money go? The person who's paying maintenance needs to remember that the maintenance is not paid to that spouse. It is received by that spouse on behalf of the children. It's a child's right to maintenance. And that needs to be borne in mind when people are arguing publicly about maintenance.
Just before I let you go, would you advise then on either side, if you're involved in a face-off of this kind, trying to draw those boundaries and trying to get what is right for the child, that a paper trail is very important on either side if eventually it does go to court?
In terms of claiming the maintenance,
Yes,
certainly.
indeed.
Because remember, when you go to the court, you will hold, if it really falls apart and an inquiry needs to be held, you will only be able to claim the expenses that you can actually prove in court. So if it is that there's a maintenance dispute happening and you want to approach the maintenance court, a paper trail of any expenses which you have incurred in respect of the minor children is always important for you to be able to prove it in court.
And I suppose the person on the other side who's saying, but I have been paying maintenance, it's important to keep a record.
Their record as well, absolutely, yes.
We'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much. Hopefully we would have helped somebody out deciding what direction to go if they are faced with a similar situation.